Hi everyone, it's Tamara here with another card making tutorial. This time I'm celebrating the new year with the new release stamp from Sweet November Stamps, Party Snowman. I'm going to do some ink blending of a snowy scene background and some Copic colouring of the snowman. So let's get started with some ink blending. I've printed out my digi stamp of this snowman so that I can use the size of it so I can work out where to place everything in my scene. I've got a piece of smooth white cardstock that I've got cut a little bit bigger than the rectangle die I'll be using to cut it out, and also be using the MFT Summer Wave Stencil and just using the waves to create some snowbanks to my card. I'll be using Distress Oxides in Hickory Spoke and Tattered Rose, and I've got my Make Art station where I've got a little bit of glue on the front to hold my piece of cardstock in place, and then I'll just grab my image and work out roughly where I need to place my snowbanks down the bottom. Then I can use my magnets to hold that stencil in place, and I'll just pop one on the bottom just to make sure that that stays in place. I'll be using my domed Ranger sponge applicators for this, and I'll be starting in Hickory Smoke first, blending up from the actual snowbanks stencil that I'm using, or the wave stencil that I'm making snowbanks. So I'm just working in circular motions, just fading that Hickory Smoke out into the white cardstock and just building up the darker color down the bottom near the stencil. And then I'll bring in the Tattered Rose, and I'm just going to dab out because I'm just wanting to make sure that it's a nice light blending between the Hickory Smoke and the Tattered Rose. So I'm just using that sponge applicator and just dabbing it off onto my glass mat and just picking up any excess ink that is on my glass mat just to make sure I get a nice soft blend between the grey and the pink. Going back to the Hickory Smoke, build up the colour a little bit more and blend into that Tattered Rose, and then we'll finish off with the Tattered Rose just blending up into that white card space. So just work back and forth between the two colours until we get a nice smooth blend, and then I'm going to grab out my metallic watercolour paints from Alt New and a rounded brush. I will have all the details in the description box below. I'll just use my distress sprayer to put some of that water into the pan that I'll be using. And because obviously I had this still attached to my Make Art station, I just kind of built a little a frame around it to stop any ink going onto my work surface. So now I'll just clean up where you can see some is splattered down the bottom of the stencil. And then to clean up the rest, I'll just remove that stencil from our card front and we'll set that aside to dry while we work on the colouring. I did have someone recently leave a comment asking if I could do some talking while I do my colouring. I'm not the best at talking while I colour. There are some wonderful people out there like Amy that do an amazing job doing two things at once. I find it a little bit difficult, but I'll be subbing over this, so hopefully I can explain a little bit of the colouring as we go through. You can see all the colours that I've got up in that little white circle I have on my mat, but I also do have all the colours listed in the description box below. Now I'm only putting a small amount of colour onto our snowman and also just leaving a gap that you'll see on the outside to make him look like he's a round kind of figure that he is, so that like it has a bit of shine from the light going onto the outer edges of him. And I'm just trying to place all my shadows in place so I know where to put my colours. And I'm working just down into the lighter colour, leaving as much white space as I can so that he does look like a nice white snowman. So I'm just kind of going through that, just blending that out, just trying to fade that into that white. So just go on either side of that stripe that goes around and also around the edge that we're leaving blank. Just blend that C00 out and just kind of flicking motion up so that that works really well into that white cardstock. And just to make sure we've got a nice soft line, I'm just going in with a 0 pen, the colourless blender, and just trying to soften those lines up so that that is a nice soft look into our white cardstock. I'll just keep blending that so that it's nice and smooth, and then we can work on his other colors of his hat and so forth. So I'm going to be using E42 just to lay down my shadows on his scarf, flicking down the bottom and just where it kind of overlays and where he'd be throwing a shadow off his body. Then going over with the R30 to kind of blend that shadowing out, and just kind of working in like little flicking motions so that we can have a nice soft edge to allow the other colors to blend out nicely. I'm going in then with the R00, blending that R30 out, just working up into that white space and just down the bottom, and then we'll finish with the final color, which is E000, just so that it's got a nice highlight in those lighter areas of our coloring. And I will go off camera, I will do another coat of this to make sure that I get a nice strong color blend. For his nose, I'm using E97 as the darkest color down the bottom, blending that out with the Y07 and finishing for a nice kind of lighter color on the top with YR02. Now for the little kind of blower and also the kind of puffy spots on his hat, I'm going to be using the ends. So I'm laying down kind of a rough guide of where I want the darkest colors to sit on his hat with the lightest color, the N4. Then I'll go in with my darkest color. So we've got the shadows from where I've got the kind of light coming from the right hand side. So the darker shadows will be on the left, away from that light source. Then we'll blend out with the N6 as our medium color, and also put that darker on that back edge, just working to that lighter front. Just kind of just doing little dot motions to get kind of like a nice fluffy look to our hat. Again, working that back area, working towards that lighter area, and then we'll finish with our little blower with the N4. So that's all our coloring done. Now that our back panel's dry, I just need to work out where I'm going to be placing my rectangle die to cut that out. So I'm grabbing our image which I've cut out, and then also I'll be using the sentiment from the Lawn Fawn Magic Holidays messages. So it is the Happy New Year sentiment out of that set. Just going to be placing that on the top right hand corner, kind of opposite where our snowman will be at the bottom. And we'll just line up our rectangle, making sure that there's plenty of room for our snowman to sit in the middle. Then I'll get my my purple tape, and we'll just attach that rectangle to the front of our cardstock with our removable tape so that I can run that through the die cutting machine in the correct place. Now I've run that through the die cutting machine, so I've got my rectangle all ready to go. So I've grabbed out my MISTI and just popped that into the front, just using my snowman to make sure I'm putting my sentiment in the correct spot. So we'll move him out of the way and get that attached to the MISTI door. Now because I haven't used this stamp before, I'm just going to prime it to make sure it doesn't have any bits on it by rubbing it with my fingers. And using my anti-static powder tool, I just put a powder on the front of our panel to make sure our embossing powder sticks only where we want it. And then I'm double stamping with my Versa watermark ink and grabbing out my folded piece of white printer paper to catch the excess of my embossing powder. I'm using the Lawn Fawn Rose Gold embossing powder today, and I've chosen that to match in with the colours that I've coloured our snowman and also the background, which I will be entering this for the current Sweet November Stamps monthly challenge, which is get extra entries if you use the pink colour. So hopefully I'll stand a good chance of potentially winning that. So I've already grabbed out a cardstock that I had in my stash, which was a nice kind of silver sparkly cardstock. and I will have all the measurements in the description box below. So I've just glued that that panel straight to my card front. But to make sure our little snowman, our party snowman, is the center of attention, I'm just going to prop him up with a lot of foam tape. So I'm just kind of, cutting little pieces so that all his little extra parts are all supported. So where his blower is, where his party hat is, and his leg. And I've removed all the release paper. Now I've got that done. I'm going to attach it to our card front, just kind of lining him up to stand in that snowbank just below that sentiment, and make sure I'm happy with that and give that a good press down. And this is the finished card for this tutorial. This was super simple to make, and it's great just having kind of like a one layer card at the bottom with just a little bit of foam tape to prop up your image on the front. I hope you've enjoyed this card making tutorial. This was really fun to make, and I think it turned out really pretty. Thank you so much for watching. If you've liked watching this video, please click the like button, and if you'd like to see any future videos, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Thanks again for watching. Have a great day. Bye.